The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of? Let the dark ones rise. A live recording of some of the finest horror authors writing in America today. Recorded at the KGB Bar in New York City.
I'm T. Fox Dunham, host of What Are You Afraid Of podcast, and I'm here this evening to introduce what we have called the Dark Five, or, as this event has been called, Let the Dark Ones In. I'm an author with several presses, including Grey Matters Press, and Grey Matter Press has brought us together under the auspices of Tony Rivera. This evening, you will be presented work from some of the finest dark fiction authors currently writing, including the premiere of Mr. White by John Foster. Tonight, T. Fox Dunham, me, I don't have my own announcer, so I have to announce myself, will be reading. We also have Sean Mocomer, J. Daniel Stone, Daniel Braun, and of course, John Foster, who will be reading this evening. I thought you can clap. I want to thank the KGB Club for bringing us here this evening. Without the support of such institutions to give us free rein over our imaginations and our audiences, such authors as ourselves, because we're all struggling indie authors trying to fight in an industry that's very hard on beginners, would not be able to function or even to survive. You are our soil. You're the grassroots. And I always say, before you can build a large audience, you have to start with one person at a time. Because we're not here to sell our books. We're here to sell ourselves. If we can convince you that we're interesting, if we're fascinating, that we can give you bad dreams that you want to go back and have more, then you will read our books. So this evening, open your hearts, open your minds, open the dark places in your soul, and think, how do I relate to these stories? Because what we're doing is exercising fear. Because life will make us afraid enough. So I'm the host of What Are You Afraid Of podcast, along with Phil Thomas, a budding filmmaker out of Philadelphia, and we do the darkness. We collect ghost stories. So if you have any true ghost stories, we'd love to hear them. You can get a card and email them to us at whatayouafraidof117@gmail.com. And we basically delve into all sorts of darkness, and you can find us on all sorts of podcasts and iTunes, and just look us up online. Now, I will be starting off this evening, and I would like to read to you a story that has a deep place in my own heart. I'm a cancer survivor. When I was 17 years old, they told me I had a rare form of lymphoma that I would not survive. I was the 10th person in the world to have it, and I am the first survivor. Clap, go on. I'm going to edit out the part where I said clap. I can do that, I have power. But, so, one of the things that I did to get through it was meeting a lot of people my own age, because we were all going through Penn And rare cancers, a lot of younger people have them. So I was 17, there were a lot of kids that were 12 through 18, and I would bring them hope. I would bring them life. I would tell them stories. And the one thing that I learned, which was a terrible lesson, especially as I lost people I loved, is that cancer is not something you can control with positive stories and love. It's nice to hear that, and I love good movies based on that. But the fact is, people die when they die, and we have no control over that. Was I not positive enough? Is an 8-year-old girl dying of cancer not positive enough? What's the difference? And I wrote this story called The Last Elf, and it had a hard time finding a market because of the subject matter. In fact, I remember the Royal British Society of Science Fiction rejected it. Even though they said it was a good story, they still rejected it. I mean, I always hear that, it's a good story, why aren't you taking it? And they said, Fox, we just can't publish a story about concentration camps and elves. Odd, though, isn't it? By the way, this is Malcolm, my little icon from my days. He was given to me, my little fox, my totem spirit, when I was going through it. And he is here to represent all the people who did not survive, who could not be here on this journey. The Last Elf. This was published by Grey Matter Press and Omnius Realities by T. Fox Dunham. The Last Elf. This was published by Grey Matter Press and Omnius Realities by T. Fox Dunham. Hans Fischer had come to believe that Obersturmführer had been assigned to was insane. Place the butter, the bait, Obersturmführer Lear ordered. Then we'll set another lure at the south gate. Rottenführer Hans Fischer set a plate on the frozen soil at the base of the guard tower. He cut a wedge of butter from the tin and spread it out on the plate. He hadn't seen butter since the war began, and when the Oberst turned his back, he licked the knife. His mouth salivated at the salty flavor, the smooth texture. Fischer followed him along the fence to the next trap. He set the butter. He looked up and read the phrase, Arbeit macht frei. Work makes free. This was above all the gates at concentration camps. Arbeit macht frei. It was a lie. Molded in cold iron letters above the gate. Wagner blasted over a speaker hanging from the guard post, one of the many strung along the many barracks and towers, the fences and gates. The speakers butchered the Meistersinger into a tinny racket. They followed the fence to the next set trap. Lear surveyed the barren hills around the camp with hawk eyes. The Oberst must have had powerful friends to be allowed such a large ration of butter, used merely to spoil in the air on the errands of a madman. He didn't understand their work, but he preferred serving under a madman to fighting in southern Russia. The gods had reprieved Fischer with that special transfer, pulling him off the troop train. It's good to be home, Lear said. I've been all over the Greater Reich, hunting. Now I shop for a fox. It may be wounded, limping. This kind of factory sickens their soul, weakens them. A fox? Fischer said. Is this for sport? No, Lear said. Hell spit from his eyes. Fox is a code word? We hunt an escaped inmate? A spy? Fischer couldn't break the proclivity to interview, having worked as a reporter for a couple years in Berlin before the war, asking questions only lured trouble. Citizens of the Reich always kept one eye closed. He bundled up in his green coat against the clawing winter wind. No, Fischer! We hunt a monster, a true goodness, an evil. It comes from the dregs of Pandora's jar. I know he is here. I know this elf knew he couldn't resist. So many souls without hope drawing him in. An addict. I can feel him close by. See the signs. An elf? Pondered Fischer. Was it code? Maybe he meant a communist spy or downed American pilot. Lear pointed to the ground. Time. Sprouting. Up in the dead winter. Growing overnight. Sprouting at his footfalls. See the trail? He's here! Once the Oberst had called the herb patch's tracks, Fischer could see the markings of the trail, but a madman can perceive patterns in anything. The Waffen SS were mass-produced, punched out of tin by I.G. Farben. Obersturmführer Lear wore the standard uniform for the Waffen SS, the super soldier of no remorse. He wore a grey tunic with silver Waffenbraffen on his shoulder spun in rune work, and his iconic Schutzstaffel on his left lapel, written in silver bullion letters. Yet he was unlike any soldier Fisher had ever known. Instead of the ceremonial dagger usually worn, he adorned a scabbard at his belt, complete with longsword. Fisher sensed the sword vibrating, waiting, a vacuum of cold radiating from a sleeping blade. He shook it off. On his arm, the Obersturmführer wore a black patch adorned with red bleeding moon, designating his special status. He tied a cloth bag on his belt with several locks of blonde hair, probably trophies taken from the commissars he's executed in Belarus. From the bag, Lear withdrew 3 seeds, rubbed them between his thumb and forefinger. What do you mean by elf, Herr Oberst? An elf, an Earl, a creature of the other world, the Summerland. Fisher nodded, wondering how long this assignment would last. Still, this was better than fighting in Russia. From one of the guard towers, a soldier sounded a siren. He directed their view to the third plate. There, Fisher could make out a sickly fox lapping the butter. The fox looked up, realizing the trap. The animal backed up on his hind legs, aimed its nose to the sky, and launched, almost clearing the top of the fence. It brushed against the coil of barbed wire, eviscerating its flesh, leaving bits of white, bloody fur on the barbs. The caught fur morphed into strands of golden hair. "We've driven him out! I knew butter would do. Should we be after him?" Fisher asked. "We shall wait. We shall see. These creatures are hunted with patience. I can scry him now that I know his form." From his pockets, the Oberst drew out 2 oak leaves, both polished to conspicuous, 2 clear membranes of glass. He pressed a leaf to each eye, clinging to the moisture on his lids. He knelt in the dirt, carving runes with willow and wand drawn from his jackboot. "I see him. It is the one, after all this time. Oh, it's good to be home. Sehr gut." "What do you see, Herr Oberst?" Next scene. Shion pushed all 4 legs. He should have known the butter was a trap. His legs trembled, his flesh afire. The misery residue of that place coating to his skin like sticky smoke. He couldn't help himself. A quick smattering. It nourished, it healed. But the mortals had seen. The hunter had known. The hunter had come. He could smell death on him. The death of she. He hared across the monochromatic countryside. Winter had exfoliated the color from the landscape. He sought refuge in the near valley that had been his home since the mountains were hills. His flesh wounds smarted. He pushed himself on, pumping the ground. He smelled the hunter behind him, the hair of sheepskin worn like trophies on his belt. Patches of grass soothed his pulse, inviting him to lay down to sleep. Perhaps the time had come to leave this world. Was there any place for fae or dreams? Hope could only hurt now. Hope. There had to be. As long as there was life, he had to be strong. For those believe. He saw a familiar barn below, collapsing on itself like a sunken rib cage. He recognized it as belonging to a mortal boy he once knew, long ago, in the golden days of his life. There he might find sanctuary. There had to be hope. New scene. "Eyes sharp, Rotenführer Fisher. But look not forward with your eyes, but from the sides, the corners. Look where the daylight meets the shadows of the trees, where the hills meet the plains. The in-between places. Witness. Record. This is why I brought you here. I needed such a man with your skills. What I'm about to do will change the Reich, the world forever." They stood in a hillside, smoky grass, pine trees huddled together for safety. A derelict barn in the valley below. A line of railroad tracks sliced the countryside, leading to the gates of the camp. "I think a change in weather to torment," Lear said, to erode the last of his will. He withdrew his sword from its scabbard, raised it to the sky. The metal blade glowed. A sideways 8, the symbol of eternity, made up its hilt. 2 skulls fit in the holes of the loop. Fisher felt a vibration emitting from the sword. Always heard a song, a winter chant. He muttered a prayer in ancient tongue, gibberish to Fisher. He directed the sky with his sword like a conductor's baton, sewing and weaving the clouds. Needles of sleet fell, pricking the snow, stinging Fisher's face. He pulled his coat tight around him. "Tell me, Rotenführer Fisher, do you think me a madman, chasing mythical creatures? Did I summon the weather with my words of power? Or did I keep incantating until the weather changed? A trick of timing, which I claimed to be mystical control." Fisher considered lying, but then Lear already knew his opinion. Lying would make it worse. "Fairies are the offspring of a diseased mind. We hunt a mere fox. I appreciate the metaphor, though, but I think you only brought me out here so you'd have someone to listen to your ravings. I appreciate your honesty, I need someone to be honest, someone who can record this without embellishment. It's been my life's work, and after tonight my life will be complete. Lear plucked 3 seeds from his bag and rolled them between his fingers. They marched to the valley below, the derelict barn. Before the First World War, he said, my father moved me and my mother out here to Ashwashem, a nice suburb, for a position as a teacher in the new school. My father was a good man. Many nights he'd tell me folk tales of gods and fairies. Then the Great War came, and he was off to France to do his duty for the fatherland. A year later, I remembered my mother sobbing, a letter in hand, a gas attack and a faulty gas mask. We moved back to Berlin to a small apartment. She worked as a waitress, but times were hard. All our savings turned to nothing overnight in rampant inflation. To survive, she took in male callers who often beat her and me. But it bought bread and coal. Then I came home from school and found her in a pool of blood on the floor. I became a child of the street. This was my real education. I'd grown up delusional, living in a story world of hope and justice. That good always won. I was unprepared for the cold reality. If I had understood, been stronger, I could have saved my mother. I flipped a coin and joined the NSDP to fight the communists. Tails, I would have joined the communists. I didn't care. Such was my raise. But then I met a schoolmaster with pince-nez glasses who listened many times to my folk tales my father had passed to me. The timid man understood the threat, knew what had to be done. Through him, destiny employed me. Lear sighed and scanned the horizon. A trail carrying more cargo and sealed cattle cars pulled into the camp, slowing on the tracks, metal grinding against metal, screeching like a mourning mother. Now the cargo on that train, that is reality. Why are they on the trains and not us? Because they had faith in a good world, a land of milk and honey, such as belief is weakness. So now I hunt those who would spread that sadistic litany, creatures that vomit such nonsense into the minds of spirits and innocent children, children who walk into the hungry jaws of the monstrous world like cattle into a slaughterhouse. In this way I shall strengthen Germany. This elf, Fisher asked. Lear nodded. The schoolmaster and I defined a new religion for the SS, grand pomp and ceremony for the new Germanic lords of the earth, a new faith for the state. I studied and trained to hunt the beast and cleanse the lands for the new German spirituality. I traveled into the occupied countries to shatter crucifix and desecrate temple, clearing for a new faith, our faith. Lear paused and scanned the landscape with raptor eyes. He pointed out a red trace below the barn. Fisher saw a fox, his white belly fur blood-stained. A quarry. It is just a fox. Can't you see? There are no elves or pixies or dwarves. It hides in the body of a fox. I know this one well. You have seen, heard my tale. Go on back to get warm. The circle is complete. New scene. Shion had seen them on the hillside. The young soldier and the SS Waffen, who had looked so familiar. As a fox, he had snuck in and out of the camp for a year now, and no one had noticed anything. He could hide in his glamour from most mortals, but Shion sensed something of the she about this soldier. This hunter could see him, pierce his glamour. On his belt, Shion smelled this kind of scent. No time to weep for them. He could feel the bite of cold iron nearby. He crawled through a hole in the side of the derelict barn. The wood buckled from dry rot. He shook the rotten straw from his fur. Even the spider webs in his rafters had been abandoned for years. The New World had long forgotten this place, this building, once the life heart of the farm for centuries, now left to die, to fade to dust. He sensed the lonely spirit of the place, sought to comfort it. Shion had come home. Wearing the fox had exhausted him. He grew his limbs long again, brushed away the fur from his silvery skin, pulling back the lambent hair from his eyes. He crawled into one of the stalls and hid beneath a pile of boards. He caught his hair on a rusty nail, and it yanked off his scalp. He covered his mouth to stifle a cry. It would end. Anon, it had to end. On the wind he smelled the leather on the hunter's jackboots, the blood of his brethren on his belt. The hunter forced his way through the barn door, pushing the fallen beams aside. A cloud of dust stirred in the air. Shion held still, tried not to cough. The pounding of the mortal's heart deafened Shion as he drew near. 6 little mice sat down to spin. Pussy passed by, and she peeped in. He could see the SS officer through a crack in the woodpile. He trembled when he saw the sword, icy iron, forged by this man's hand in iron and malice, in blood. From this sword he could feel the cries of his brethren, their names edged in the blade, a trace of their life force. He knew for sure now. He heard the spirit of the wrought iron sword speaking to him. Cold heart, icy heart, come now I have for you, to smell your blood on my hilt and shoulder and blade. then I shall weep, for no more she-blood shall I have to taste. Xian was the last elf. The officer looked through the debris, kicking it about with his boots. If he turned his back, Xian might have made it to the door to the open country. He coiled, waiting for his chance. Come out, my little elb. It's May Day. Beautiful Earl, the flowers are blooming, the sun is shining. He held Icy Heart at the ready, Carillion sparks raining from the blade. Vapors blew in the cold from his hot lungs, steam from his boiling blood. The hunter kicked an old milk tin. It hit the wall above Xian, bringing down debris. In the fracas, the hunter turned sharply to avoid being struck. As he did, Xian took flight. He made it to the light of the portal. Then he felt the hunter's boot come down hard on his back. The officer pressed Xian to the splintered floor, cracking his bones under his foot. The elf twisted his head about and saw the hunter's face, so familiar. Quickly, Xian sang a few notes of an ancient tongue, and a bolt of light fired from the elf's mouths and into the hunter's eye, the last of his magic. If he didn't make it back to his she-mount now, he'd be dead before moonrise. The hunter fell back, dropping the sword. Icy Heart hit the dirty floor planks, clattering complaints. The hunter rubbed his eyes. Xian hared for the door. Hearing him, the hunter reached into his bag tied his belt, grabbed a mouthful of seeds, and tossed them. The flax seeds sprayed like a mist into the floor, and Xian yelped at the seeds and halted, now chained by a quirk of his species, compelling him to pick up each seed. The hunter must have known the ways of the she. Xian, you are there. I can feel your warmth on my face. The hunter knew his name. Remember me, he said to the elf. The hunter pulled his hands from his cradling eyes. Xian recognized his face. A sun rose in the elf's heart. Eric! Young Eric of the stream, is that you? It is. I nearly didn't know you. Your face is so raw like chiplint. Yeah, Xian. Your old playmate has returned home. I confess how joyful I am to see you. You probably look the same as ever, eternal. In a few moments, when your incantation is cleared from my eyes, I shall know. Such a trick, such cunning. Still gathering seeds, he crept closer to Eric. The boy's visage had stretched, dried into leather, but still in his eyes he detected traces of a boy he had known summers ago. Images filled his mind of happier times, of picnics at the stream, fishing holidays, of swimming under the moonlight in the cool waters of the Vistial River. Eric, Xian said, gesturing to the trophy scalps tied in his belt, what have you become? You may address me as Obersturmführer Lehr of the SS Waffen. Why, Eric? Did I teach you nothing? How could you become this monster? What about your music, your father? I loved you. Love? Love? How dare you speak of love? Master of deceit, of lies, of spurious hope, my heart had not darkened, it is clear. The sudden wave of hate from Eric knocked she back into the support beams, sapping his remaining vitality. I gave you such gifts, Xian said. Light, hope, the gifts you needed to live in a harsh world. I wanted you to be happy. Happy? You sadistic rat! You taught me that life and good always triumphs over evil, and that love always wins the day. Lear focused on Xian, his eyes clearings. You set me up like a lamb for the slaughter. My father, a good man, dead in France, no happy ending. My mother prostituted herself for a slice of bread and was murdered. A fairy tale. How many people have you filled with hope? How many Jews and Poles and Russians? Did you sing your song as they went to the showers? Were they smiling as they were dumped into the ovens? Eric spoke true. Xian had come all this time to this terrible place to make the children laugh and the old ones happy with songs. He had filled their dreams with flowers and memories of happy days of their childhood. He had told them to hold on, another day of freedom would come. Xian collapsed to the floor, no longer trying to escape. Eric would know best. Eric, help me. Eric picked up the sword from the floor, brushed the dust off his sleeve. He readied the weapon, Icy Heart silenced in veneration of this moment. My dearest one, Eric said, I know that you are in pain. I come in love. Do not struggle. I know you never meant any wrong. Will light come to the world again? When men have gone to dust, perhaps. Eric raised Icy Heart. Rumpelstiltskin, Eric said. He brought the sword down. The elf's fair skin blistered. Moonlight hemorrhaged from the wound, boiling off in the mist. Rumpelstiltskin. Black pockmarks formed along Xian's neck and face. Rumpelstiltskin. With his final thrust, he sliced through the elf's neck like a hot brand through snow. Xian's head fell away. His long golden hair peeled from his scalp. His flesh dissolved into ash. The wind carried it into the open fields, to dissipate mote by mote so nothing recognizable to the world remained. Once Xian's body remained only his heart. peach bit, a daffodil bulb. It fell through the crack in the floor. His work done, Obersturm Eriklear fell to his knees, sobbing. He pulled the golden strands from his belt and dropped them. His duty complete, he felt hollow, a void. He wondered whether it would serve his country better to die fighting the Russians in the East or the Americans in France. It mattered not which nation took the throne. His mission on the mortal world had ended. He bundled some of the straw and ignited it with a lighter. The beams quickly ignited, embracing the fire, the building giving itself over, relieved finally of its broken body. Snow fell, blowing on wind gusts and heavier flakes, smelling of brimstone. Not snow, but ash, blowing out from the smokestacks of the crematorium from the camps. Its work proceeded. When the barn had burned away, leaving smoking piles of ash like burial mounds, and the ash blew away in the wind, leaving only the warm soil, protected from the elements like a womb. When finally the Third Reich fell and new countries lived and died, and the mortal nations came and went, when birch trees grew in the fields along the rivers, and the memories of the old mortals failed, assuaged, emancipating history, a tiny crocus sprouted from the bulb that had once been the Alps' heart. It raised its head to the dim sun and opened its petals to the world. Children would come. They'll find this flower and dream its new limb and eyes and toes. It'll suckle on their songs, games, and walk on the legs, and lambent hair will grow from his head, pouring like sunlight. And with nascent life, the last elf will imbue hope. That was The Last Elf by T. Fox Dunham.
Quality warning. This podcast often records in the field to gather the best in paranormal materia from witnesses. Often, we cannot control the quality of sound in this environment, such as you may hear distortions or perhaps the occasional moaning. But then again, we're not about control, are we?
Embrace the chaos.
Was there a point where, is this all after the fact that you decided to write about this, or did the process of going through this, was part of the coping mechanism you used, be sort of the realization that you were going to write about it eventually?
I've lived in this world for so long, and every day you think cancer. Because they told me it was going to come back years ago, and I waited to die. I had a very rare form of lymphoma, and I just waited to die every day, and I lived in this nihilistic mindset. So when I slept, I dreamt of cancer. When I wrote about cancer, my experience, because it obsesses you. And so, and it's funny because I just got married last May, and she'd convinced me it wouldn't come back. And then 2 months later, they biopsied my neck, and there it was. And they cut a big chunk out of my neck, and I felt like I'd been lied to. So it's been more of an obsession, this waiting, this terrible waiting. And these books became a catharsis. Like Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman was the way reality disintegrated. Or Mercy was about the pain and invasion that I went through. Or my novella with PMMP, Kevorkian Goes to Heaven, which is a lot of fun. You can find that for free right now. Kind of based on Mark Twain's Captain Stormfield Goes to Heaven, but also very Vonnegut-like. And to answer your question, I hate writing about this stuff, but I've had to as a catharsis because I'm trying to break free of it. My next book, I don't even want to mention cancer. I'm running a crime thriller in Philadelphia. But does that help?
Yeah. And so tell people exactly how rare this is, because it's pretty amazing.
Oh, the lymphoma?
Yeah.
Well, I was diagnosed with something called composite lymphoma. And it took them 3 months to even find it because only 9 other people in the world had been diagnosed with it. And they didn't know how to treat it. The fact that I survived is a miracle or a mathematical anomaly. It depends if you believe in God.
And can you tell me about splitting those? You mentioned there's sort of a different vibe between the 2 books that are about this. Can you talk to me about how you split between those?
Andy, Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, published by Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing in November. It's fun. It's whimsical. It's about 3 friends, very odd creatures, all of them, very broken people, who go on a journey to prove one of them is dying. He's dying at 18, and he comes to believe that the song and dance man, don't call him comedian, Andy Kaufman was his father. So they decide to go to north, to Long Island, to find his family and get a DNA test. And it's this crazy road trip along the way. as reality begins to break down. In fact, the last scene that I do for Anthony is he comes to this play, this Andy Warhol-like play, and he's watching this play, and he actually joins into the play as reality breaks down and he dies. Now, that's a whimsical, fun, happy, but with that dark, sad undertone to it. But it's also about hope. This book is about violation. This book is about infiltration. It's about the pain that I suffered. And not just of the body, but also of the heart, as Willie is divided between two loves. Life is an addiction for him, and he has to give it up if he wants to free his soul.
Yeah. And, a lot of the areas you go into this is sort of like the metaphysics of it. It feels like those are areas you really were forced to become acquainted with through this process.
One of the ways I survived was through shamanic practice, and we take otherworld journeys, and it's very metaphysical. And so while I was going through this, I was going on what we call engramas, meditating and leaving this world, and finding the expression of what was happening to me in metaphors. So I turned Willie into a scarecrow, and he goes through the same experiences.
All right. Well, I actually reviewed Mercy for Fangoria, which you can find it online. So it's a really, it's an amazing book, and I appreciate you answering some questions.
So I'm here tonight, hosting. Thank you for your kind attention. That was a self-accusation of my first story. I thank Gene Brewer for mentoring me with that piece. He wrote K-Pax years ago. It was a movie with Kevin Spacey, a great movie. But tonight, by the way, my book, Destroying the World of Andy, Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality, or Searching for Andy Kaufman is here. Mercy just came out from Bloodbound Books. You can find that online. And I want to introduce now Daniel Brahm. And he'll be reading tonight, and it's a little bit about him. Like a vinyl record from Days by author Daniel Baum spins a unique blend of speculative fiction that effortlessly blends fantasy, science fiction, horror, and mysticism in every verse. Weaving a tapestry of quantum intelligence, Brahm's multidimensional characters are drawn into dark worlds of spiritualism, where concepts of advanced science collide with magic realism to investigate the unexplainable at the edges of civilization. Defying conventional categorization, his work thrives in the gray area between many genres. His short story, An American Ghost in Zurich, appeared in Savage Beast Anthology, which we have tonight at the table, along with some other great books from Grey Matters Press, including Mr. White by John Foster. Make sure to pick that up. Keep your eye out for news coming from StokerCon on May 12th, where there will be announcements made about Brahm's forthcoming projects with Grey Matter Press. So tonight, let's welcome Daniel Brahm.
How's everyone doing? All right. So as usual, I write 30,000-word dissertations and commercials about what I want to tell all you guys about Grey Matter Press. But I'm just going to... Anthony Rivera, the publisher, can't be here tonight. So I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that I just want to share with you. Fox, thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you said about Grey Matter Press. If Anthony was here, he would want to tell you guys that Mr. White marks the first novel from Grey Matter Press, so we're here to celebrate with John. It's a great... I'm so pleased to be here. And it just came out this week. Savage... many of the authors here were brought together from the Savage Beast, which is a music-themed project. We have music journalist and dark fiction author Sean McComber. We're really happy to have him here tonight. He has a story in Savage Beasts. I have a story in Savage Beasts, and so does Fox. And one project I want to mention from Grey Matter Press is called Dread. I think most of the people might know about it. For the people in podcast land, Dread is a reader-curated Best of Grey Matter Press edition. I've read it from cover to cover, and if you know me, you know that's the hard thing to do, and that's actually a really good endorsement. Let's face it. It's a beautiful book. I love beautiful books. I love books as things. It's coming out as an ebook, a trade, and also it marks Grey Matter Press's foray into the limited edition world. So Everyone's done a great job with it. I hope you consider taking a look at it. But we're here to celebrate Mr. White, which released on Tuesday. So if everyone has a drink, if I could propose a toast. To John, to Anthony, to Gray Matter Press, to Mr. White, and to everyone out there, as Fox said, thanks to everyone for being here and for supporting us. Cheers. Nostrovia. Cheers. So I think usually when I'm in KGB, it's become a tradition for me not to read from An American Ghost in Zurich, which I was supposed to do. But instead, I have been granted special permission to read, because I can't wait any longer, from Mr. White. So this is Mr. White. Just a little bit of it by John C. Foster, Chapter 1. Who is Mr. White? There was a pause and crackle of static over the phone. Abel was about to speak again when the connection was severed. Einen Wichteren Arnf Titingen Legen Sie bitte? Abel hung up before the mechanical, feminine voice could finish telling him how to make another call. He turned back towards the crowd and the dimly lit bar, letting his gaze wander from face to face to face, his eyes stinging from the haze of smoke hovering beneath the low ceiling. He was grinning faintly and chuckling. He returned to his spot and ordered another beer. "Bitte," he said to the bartender when a fresh pint was placed before him. "Who is Mr. White?" Click. He sipped, nodding at a man holding court with the stein in one hairy fist. He was at ease, a somewhat familiar face around this part of Schweitenplatz in the center of the city. It was warm inside, and everyone was talking themselves into having at least one more drink before heading out into the snow. Abel turned, leaning one elbow on the bar, another happy regular at Das Hopfenschwein. He didn't look Austrian, but his wardrobe and hair seemed as though it was possible he came from Ireland or Scandinavia, and his flawless German, unlike mine, refuted any possibility he was American. He forced himself to sip slowly, relaxing his shoulders outwardly at ease. "Danke," he said to the barman's back, catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror behind the bar. Good, he projected relaxation. He looked anything but afraid. The train clacked and rattled as it raced southbound along underground tracks towards the outskirts of Vienna. It was late, and only a few second-shift workers returning home shared the coach with Abel. A big man reading the newspaper, a couple of city workers in stained coveralls hanging from the overhead rail, a woman in a domestic's uniform sitting across from him. Abel sank into the bench, wrinkling his nose at a rank undersmell that infected the atmosphere on the car. He had already stepped off the train twice and boarded the next in line, keeping an eye out for familiar faces and postures, indicators of interest. There was nothing. Nothing at all out of place, but still he felt on edge. Maybe it was the smell. "Who is Mr. White?" he muttered in English, looking up to see the domestic eyeing him with a flat stare. He glanced over to see the two city workers giving him the once-over as well. Or were they? He forced himself to look away, studying the laces on his shoes and the slush puddle forming around them from the melting snow. He looked up and heard the men in their coveralls talking to each other in guttural German. When he glanced across the aisle, the woman was still staring at him. Abel closed his eyes, playing the language game to distract himself, listening to the two men. Austrians, by and large, had a liquid sound to their speech, and he placed them as immigrants from the eastern part of Germany. He opened his eyes, and the woman was leaning her head back against the glass window, sleeping. He noticed that the floor beneath her feet was bone dry, and wondered how long she had been riding the train. "Who is Mr. White?" Click. Is it time to leave Vienna, he asked himself? Shift the operation to another city? He pictured Munich in the spring and chased that image with a memory of sipping brandy on the shore of Lake Geneva. The car went black and Abel jerked in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. The roar of wheels on tracks smothered his hearing, and he looked desperately to the left as something moved in the corner of his vision. The lights flickered back on and Abel blinked, already aware that something was different. The big man with the paper, where had he gone? Abel heard the metallic slide of the door at the end of the car as it closed, and he could make out the big man walking into the next car. He sucked in a deep breath and let it out slowly, calming himself. He thought of the dinner he would have after the drop, a backstreet restaurant that kept its kitchen open late and served the most amazing platters of pork shoulder with roasted apples and spatzo. Noche Station, simmering, a voice barked from the speakers. Abel rose and grabbed a hanging strap, fumbling to close the buttons on his long coat. The woman was watching him again, dark-skinned, hair escaping from the imprisoning bun on the back of her head. She hadn't bothered to wipe the saliva from her mouth. "Fuck you," Abel said with a congenial smile as he picked up his briefcase from the seat. The doors slid open, and he stepped out onto the platform. A moment later, the train hissed into motion and roared away. He caught a quick glimpse of the woman staring at him through the window, upraised middle finger pressed against the glass. Then he was alone on the platform. In the silence that followed the vanishing train, Abel knelt and placed his briefcase on the ground, pretending to tie his shoe while he carefully scanned his surroundings. It was darker than the platforms near Vienna's night spots, dingier. Crumpled fast food wrappers and soft drink bottles were scattered about. Curling posters on the walls advertised performances that had gone dark a year ago, and he smelled the odor of finely aged urine. The familiar disorder, at least by Austrian standards, reassured him. Simmering, the last stop on the line, attracted some visitors, but never eager ones. Graveyards don't attract eager visitors. Abel pulled his collar tight to keep the falling snow off his neck and worked the pick into the lock with numb fingers. By the time he heard the click of the mechanism release, he had aged several decades, his hair and beard coated with white. He slid through the maintenance gate and pulled it closed behind him. The Zentralfriedhof was the largest graveyard in Vienna, home to the disintegrating remains of Beethoven and Brahms. Abel trudged in the opposite direction of those notables, ghosting between marble gravestones gone blue in the dark, the falling snow shrouding him, muffling his footsteps. As he descended deeper into the sea of the dead, the perimeter lights faded, and the shadows seemed to melt and flow into dark lakes across his path. It was said that there were more dead in Vienna than living, and Abel found the Zentralfriedhof a perfect place to conduct business. He had worked with the Coex before, and knew that meeting in the cemetery would give the couple a not-so-subtle thrill. The muffled crunch of shoes through the snow faded as a gust of wind blew a white curtain into his eyes. Wiping the wet coldness away, Abel was startled to see a tall figure staring down at him. "Jesus," he said, the realization that he stood before a stone angel not coming swiftly enough to douse a surge of adrenaline. He stared forward as if to curse the angel, then stop. Crunch. Abel turned slowly in place, rewinding the mental audio file and replaying it again. Had it been his own footstep? The sound distorted by the snowfall? He backed into the stone angel and looked straight up as his back met marble. It was a dark figure against the white, hook-nosed and deep-eyed, judging. Abel jerked away, and his nose wrinkled again as he smelled the rank scent from the train. A third-world odor of rotting flesh, blackened toes, and gangrene. "Ridiculous," he muttered. He was working himself up like a kid waiting for ghost stories around a campfire. Still, he thought he might take his coat to the dry cleaners tomorrow because the odor seemed to be sticking with him. "Abel, sehen Sie das?" a woman's voice floated through the night. Abel grunted in disgust. Amateurs. Of course it was him. Who else would be out here in this weather? "Ja, ja," he said, breaking his own silence. Masha hadn't shouted yet, but she might if she was getting nervous, and the silly bitch had used his name. He crunched his way towards the sound, thinking of the go bag at his flat and the heavy automatic hidden inside among the cash and identification cards. Only amateurs carried weapons in his profession, or so he had been taught, but he kept one for a rainy day or snowy night. "Abel, sehen Sie das?" Abel stopped. Something was wrong with the question. He began to back away when he heard the steps behind him. He spun, catching a glimpse of a white face that seemed to float in the darkness. Abel looked again, but the row between the gravestones was now empty. Abel, sin si das? The voice came again from beyond the vast marble mausoleum. Abel, is that you? Asked in exactly the same way, with exactly the same volume. Break contact, right now. Abel darted into another row, moving quickly away from the voice, not returning to his path of entry. He caught a slither of movement from the corner of his eye, and he heard a loud cry, followed by a splash. The gurgling death throes were unmistakable. Panic seeping in, Abel reversed directions and ran through the rows of gravestones. He slipped and landed hard. The briefcase jarred from his grip. He left it where it fell, scrambling on hands and knees. Abel, sin si das? Shit, he said, as he realized he had been herded back to the meeting point. He clawed his way to his feet, determined to sprint past whatever might be waiting for him. He ran, coat streaming, darting around the corner of the mausoleum. Oh, hell, he said to Masha. His feet slid out from under him as he tried to stop, and he fell again, the breath knocked from his lungs. Masha had been crucified against the back of the mausoleum, railroad spikes driven through her outstretched wrists. Her chest was covered by a red bib flowing from the tear in her throat. A flashlight planted in the snow at her feet threw its light upward, transforming her expression into a ghoulish mask and causing the freezing blood in her blouse to glisten like rubies. Abel, seen... No, he moaned over the recorded voice emanating from her coat pocket. Abel turned away from her, crawling through the snow, the bonds holding his back as panic shattered. A pair of boots blocked his path, and he looked up to see the white face floating in the night. "Don't!" he shouted in the instant before the shadows swarmed him. There was a bright flash of pain, then darkness.
Your source for everything paranormal. Para-X.
Daniel Brom, how are you tonight?
Doing good, Fox. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Having a great time and really looking forward to April 8th. So how long have you been writing fiction?
Oh, quite some time. I believe I've been writing with professional intent for about the last 15 years or so. My first published story was back in 2004.
And fantastic. So you will be reading with us on April 8th. And what anthology?
I was published in the Savage Beasts anthology, which is Anthony Rivera and Sharon Lawson's take on music-themed fiction. Savage Beasts, a nightmare of supernatural science and sound.
And what inspired your story? What song?
There were a lot of songs, but the song of the group that was on my mind when I saw The Call was from the album Ghost Story by the band The School of Seven Bells. One of the things I like about Savage Beasts is the real variety of music that I saw other authors were inspired by, and I'm the sort of listener where I'm just not into one genre. Savage Beast has got metal. I know your story was classical music inspired. My story is a little bit alternative or hard to classify. So that's one of the great things I like about music is the variety, and one of the things that really, what I really enjoyed about the Savage Beasts book. The story is called An American Ghost in Zurich. It is from the Savage Beasts anthology from Gray Matter Press. Here's the line. With the sound of School of Seven Bells, I come alive. Everything is a black and white movie, and I am a streak of color moving through the frames. Ethereal harmonies wash over me, beautiful, but not quite on, imperfect, just like our fractured universe and everything in it.
So, that was Daniel Brom, and I want everyone to repeat after me. Sensei Das. And that's what he said, right? It was incredible. So, we're going to break for about 10 minutes. So, and I want everyone to refill your drinks. We've got an amazing night of literature still coming up. So, support KGB Bar for making nights like this possible. If you like the literature, buy one drink. If you don't like the literature, buy two. but we'll be returning in about 10 minutes, thanks, and come up and get some books. Some great stuff.
For our intermission, we have Valaris from their album The Gilded Age. This is The Gem, played with their permission.
Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror Paranormal Show Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com.
What Are You Afraid Of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X.
So let's all come back to our authors. I want to introduce J. Daniel Stone, He's a hot-blooded Italian kid from NYC. He's been published in multiple things, including The Absence of Light, which are his books, His Bastard Children, A Blood Kiss, a magazine of gay speculative fiction, Bloodbound Books, one of my guys. Yeah, Bloodbound Books, who just published My Mercy, and Prime Books. And I want to introduce to you J. Daniel Stone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Grey Matter Press. I know we're on a time constraint, so I'm going to kind of keep this short. I'll be reading from a yet-to-be-published project called I Could Taste the Blood. It was kind of a solicited project by a man some of you might know and hear. His name is John Taft. He's a very brilliant writer. This will be out in August, and it also includes another great writer, Josh Malaman, who is the author of the brilliant novel Bird Box. With that said, I do want to bring up a funny point. This story actually has a sort of German character in it, and this is not a German-themed night. I did not plan this. I did not plan the German-themed night in a Russian, red room here. Because I literally had no idea what my colleagues were reading from. I knew Mr. White, but I didn't know Foxes were going to read At any rate, okay, with that said, I'll just jump right into it. This is called I Could Taste the Blood. Films bring us together, the old man had said, but in the wrong hands they can be a weapon. The phone had rung in the middle of the night. Bach was roused out of a horrible dream, bolting upright with his eyes still closed. The silence of the apartment muffled his loud thoughts, and when he yawned he realized that his throat was sore and that he could taste the faint metallic traces of blood. He had been screaming in his sleep again. Darkness swam before him, but within his depths there was a light, a pillow candle still burning. Then he remembered the dream, a life he had been trying to avoid, junk-sick and lonely, the ghost of his sanity. Wasn't reality enough of a punishment? Why could he not escape it even in sleep? Bleep, bleep, bleep went the phone again. This time Bach reached over and picked it up, dazed, barely saying hello before the thick German accent asked him to come. He wanted to ask who it was. What did he want? He wanted to scorn the man and tell him that he should call back in the morning, but this was a voice Bach could not forget. He had already done a job for the old man for decent pay, and with money being so tight and jobs far and few in between, there was no saying no. Bach blinked once, twice, then licked his dry lips. There was a cup of wine sitting at his bedside table and an ashtray with a half-smoked clove still lit. The wine stung his lips, and his head spun upon taking a drag of his smoke. He was in the early stages of a hangover, or maybe it was a lack of sleep. When the room decided to stop shaking, his eyes met the ceiling. There was a bright crimson smudge atop the poster of a ferociously singing Maynard James Keenan, something that resembled blood or the Bahoe-Hoey swirl in a lava lamp. He reached out to touch the incandescence. But when he caught a glimpse of the moon outside, he remembered that tonight was the vernal equinox, and that the smudge was just its red shadow. There was also a strange odor in here. Not spilled craft beer, or the cocaine still daubed on his nose, not the spoiled Chinese takeout, or the cigarette burns in the upholstery. It was the smell of a ghost in sheets. Not a literal ghost, but that of someone he missed deeply. Bach rolled over, cradling dirty laundry and the bottle of cheap wine, wishing that it was Jared, but he was long gone and never coming back. Now it was time to move or he'd never make up for everything that he'd let go to shit. As he righted himself, twisting his neck back to a human position, his hair did not follow suit. It was matted and stuck to his face, black as his gypsy bloodline, and black as the coal liner crusted in his eyes. There was a moment, before his brain made sense of everything, where he caught his own skeletal reflection in the window. It reminded him of a strung-out rock star. The thought saddened him. When he moved his feet off the bed, Bach stumbled over a pile of books and broke his fall against a shelf of video cassettes. They all had belonged to Jared. Various titles and genres: Italian splatter, giallo, science fiction, horror, underground, independent, experimental. Jared had believed that films filled the void when the world turns against you. Because in films, you always come back to the same moment in time and see the same people, a safe place for anyone looking to reject the horrors of the real world. Bach lit a candle and brought it to the window. The air was crisp and dark as soot. On the eastern horizon, the moon was a candy apple, corrugated with a face that only a mother could love. Mother Earth, maybe Mother Mars. New York City looked as if it was stapled against the sky, smeared heavily with silver and gold. Bach closed the window and dressed himself in the typical fashion of the poor, Hand-me-down boots, a vintage t-shirt, and jeans with too many holes to keep him warm. He was almost too dizzy to move. The call had better been worth it. Moving on to the next scene. The theater is too dark, but smells of promise. Almost 3 decades since it had been in business, and just about a decade since the city condemned the leather, lace, and pawn shop that opened in its place. If you walk its perimeter now, you see that the private booths have been torn down and the mirrors are covered with heavy curtains. Girls no longer command the center stage, their long legs fanning and breasts dripping like fruit into the faces of men flashing money. It is the story of corrupt government administrations and gentrification. At one time, this dark void had filled eyes with technicolor nightmares that had no bearing on the world that surrounded it. And even though the memory of movies and comic strips and popcorn had gone stale, this palace of sadness and madness and bones still retained its haunted charm. At the front entrance, the ticket booth window was cracked into an intricate pattern, and the wallpaper inside was black damask. Etched onto the entrance doors was a hideous insignia, a syringe filled with globules of blood. It made Bach take a step back, as there was only one thing he knew that lived inside the needle, and that was the greed of addiction and the acquired hunger that follows until it springs death upon its human host. "I hope I didn't wake you," the old man said. "I don't turn down money." Bach bit his black fingernails. "Take those out of your mouth. You are no child." The German navigated the aisle with his pale and polished walking stick. He was dressed as best as a gentleman could be this time of night, his breath heavy with liquor and his amethyst eyes surrounded by red cobwebs. Bach couldn't remember the last time he saw the old man, but an image came into his head, a dark space and dust upon a windowsill. But as soon as the old man came into the light, Bach saw that he had remained unchanged in his sinister smile and the smell of cheap cologne and his thinning silver hair. "It's been a few months," the German said, "but our time apart has been essential to my movie." Bach was not ready to recall what had happened that night. It was during a time when he was rarely sober, but also when Jared was at his lowest. The obsession grew into a possession, and Jared would do just about anything to be in front of a camera. Back then, the job was an arduous undertaking. Not really an acting gig, but more so one that required gentle concentration and a strong stomach. It paid handsomely. A stiletto had pierced Bach's abdomen, and the claw side of a hammer had dug itself into his knee to test his reflexes. Then came the disconnect, like a wire had snapped in his head, which made Bach succumb to rage. He squeezed his counterpart's head until an eye popped clear out of the skull, crushing it in his hand like the pulp of a rotten fruit. "I hope this place doesn't disturb you. I enjoy an authentic feel." "I remember what you enjoy," Bach said. The old man tisked. "Hey, I never required you to act. I simply asked that you react, because when the camera is pointed at you, Bach, you become something more." Bach lit a fancy black cigarette and followed the old man toward the silver screen, unsure of what he was getting himself into this time, but fueled by the need to fill his empty bank account. Something about this theater irked him. It seemed aghast to Bach's presence. Everything was blighted, as if the sun had rained fire down on this place, followed by a monsoon to put out the embers. It smelled of ozone and dark matter, the air so thin it settled in his lungs like soot. "You bought this place to make more movies? Hey, what else should I have done? The city was going to sell it privately, but I could not allow another wrecking ball to make more Broadway successes. No, I could never live with myself." When the German reached the middle section, he tapped his walking stick, and a film began. With no other sound in the theater, Bach could easily hear the faint ticking of a movie projector. The immediate scenes were effulgent, and so close they threatened to spill out in a massive 3D effect. It was an old trick of the camera, laced with expert editing. "Do you remember this at all?" Bach couldn't recall. "No, not at all." The boy on the screen was youthful. His long hair sprinkled across his face the color of rust, and his eyes were green as chartreuse. Bach's heart elevated, and his hand became sweaty. The rings on his fingers caught the great light from the screen, a whiteness as great as the ginger boy's smile, a whiteness as great as his skin and the burning need to be in front of a camera. "Turn this filth off now," Bach said. But the long-haired beauty implored him. Bach could not look away now if he tried. He could see now that Jared was tied down tightly to a mattress by big black straps. Bach's crotch immediately swelled and his throat dried. A phantom memory found him. He didn't need to watch to know what would happen next. But then it did. A man in a mask dripped black candle wax onto Jared's bony torso, his bare legs and small toes. His eyes were blindfolded and his mouth was open, waiting patiently as the man in the mask unzipped himself and then shoved his penis down Jared's throat until his body quivered in orgasmic relief. "You were brilliant," the German said. "No, ruiner," Bach said. "That's what you should have named this trash." The old man laughed. "Art doesn't follow the rules. What is tradition other than a silly constriction, right?" "Right," Bach said. The old man's name was Lorenz, and from what Bach knew of his history really didn't match up to his given age. The man seemed to be shaped by centuries long past, which didn't make sense. He had supposedly been living in the United States for 50 years, after leaving Germany when he was 20, a time when the country was still trying to be prideful, but could not shake off the guilt of the Second World War. All the shame that his newborns had to carry for their predecessors was made up for in theater and art. The underground thrived. The S&M scene spawned, snuff film spawned, and somehow they got involved with the Soviet sex trade. "I was always told to feel bad for my people, but I had no idea it had to do with a little man with a mustache and a foul temper," Lorenz said. "Did you? Feel bad, I mean," Bach said. "At first, yes. But then I found my voice. In art. Film, to be precise. At that time, Cologne was a thriving playground of death. A person could find whole skeletons beneath the rubble and holes that descended to hell. It was a land of surprises. And yet you left it? I had to do my own thing. Germany can only bring me so far." Lorenz slicked back the few strands of silver hair that had fallen over his brow and continued with his story. Like most of his creative brethren, upon departing Germany, he found out that the rest of the world wasn't what he'd been trained to believe. There wasn't any apartment waiting for him in British Columbia, no California love, and no sun-kissed oranges in Florida. There was only New York City, filthy, brooding, polluted with heroin and beat poets. There wasn't any gold in the streets, Lorenz said. There was only death. The juxtaposition fascinated me. "Why?" Bach said. "You have to understand something. I was born into a time where the smell of death was more potent than it had been during the plague. All those mass graves, eventually, began to tell their mute stories of rage and sadness, but with a certain smell." "So that turned you on to the darkness?" Bach said. "No. Death fixated me, because it was all everyone talked about. What the German people did was terrible, but I'm not sure if they ever were truly sorry for it." "Well, the world may never know." Lorenz looked Bach straight in the eye. "Hey, death is something we cannot control. We have our education and our money, our passions and our lusts. We have science and art. All of that we control, but death? No, that can never be stopped." Bach began to feel uneasy. "I've made some short movies on the subject, by the way, don't you know? Little pieces of my heart put into a 45-minute film reel." Bach sucked in the clove smoke. "Like an anthology? Yeah, you could say that. An anthology of evil. To live is to be evil, inherently. Don't you understand we're all born sinners?" Bach was silent. A memory trapped him in the moment. It was too strong to fight, and so he let it droop over him like a veil. Before he knew it, the movie theater had melted away. In fact, everything faded into the silver light. Thank you.
Tonight, we're speaking with author J. Daniel Stone. How are you this evening, Daniel? It was a pleasure to spend some time with you.
I'm doing well.
So how long have you been writing?
Oof, writing. Writing for me, you mean, can we say selling stories, or do we just say writing? There's a difference. Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Writing definitely came to me as a sort of byproduct of sort of teenage angst and anger, I would say. I've always been interested in the arts, but in my early teens, kind of going through my own thing as a teenager and also divorcing parents, and as a byproduct of this, something snapped in my brain, and I decided that I needed to get my feelings down on paper. And naturally, because I was always a reader as a child, I guess it just sort of shape-shifted into actual, stories, and that's basically where it started. And I just used, my knowledge of books and my love of the written word, because I don't think anything has saved me more than the written word, to actually create my own worlds. And that's pretty much how it began. Very simple.
So how did your professional career begin?
That began in way back in 2009. Sold my first story. I was 22. I was thinking I was a big shot, and I really had no idea what I was doing. Started with a very small press back then. I got $25 whole for my first sale, and I actually, as much as I kind of regret, being with that press for a little while, it actually opened the door and introduced me to many, many writer friends that I still have to this day. So I guess you can kind of say that, it was a good thing. That was the beginning. And then I would say made some really good sales after, in the 2012 area, 2011. And that was around the same time I actually produced my first novel. I was writing my first novel during that time as well, back in late 2008, 2009. And that came out with Villipede. And, I don't know. I guess that's it.
Tell us about the story that you've published with Grey Matter Press.
Grey Matter Press, my little beloved. Yes. Grey Matter Press, I've actually been working with them for a little while now, quite some time. Back when they were first coming out, actually, I sold 2 short stories to them. So I became well acquainted with them throughout the years from my first work with short stories. I was actually approached by a writer for this current project, I Can Taste the Blood. His name is John F.D. Taff. A lot of people know him in the field.
Yeah, we had dinner together at the HWA with Tony.
There you go.
Yeah, no,
so John had read my first book, and I don't know how the hell he got his hands on it. And he approached me on Twitter and was like, "Whoa, I read this book, and you're like awesome. So read my book." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." Read his Little Deaths. I think it was The Bell Witch as well that he had out, and I liked his stuff.
So what is the story that you read in NYC? And could you read for us the line from that?
There are 2 titles, actually. The book, it has to go by the title of the book per the publisher. The publisher is telling us to call it I Can Taste the Blood. But if I had my way with it, or my title, I would have called it the Chronology of Decay. Because it's about a film. It's about a number of films that sort of cause harm to people who watch it. So, the theater is too dark but smells of promise. And that's it. That's that's the line.
Just from that one line, it sounds like the story has so much potential. And from what you read the other night at the KGB Club, I can't wait to check out some of your other work. Thank you for being on the show.
And thank you for this little interview. It's been very interesting. It's been very fun.
When we come to see the teddy bear.
We've all experienced messages from beyond the silver veil, whether we want to admit it or not. Some people take no notice, ignoring these outreaches. Others embrace them, seeing them as evidence of an expanded universe. Whether these stories frighten or comfort, we are reassured.
The mission of What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show is to explore the dark side through paranormal investigation, folklore, and the arts. The show is an audio magazine. We share true ghost stories, dark fiction, interviews with ghost hunters and indie authors, filmmakers, artists, and musicians. We discuss industry issues and offer support. We have a unique and varied theme that creates a show unlike others.
Our weekly show is featured on all major podcast services, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, and YouTube. We are a part of ParaX Radio.
We need your true ghost experiences, so write them down in an email, preferably under 2,000 words, which comes to about 3 or 4 typed pages, and send them to whatareyouafraidof117@gmail.com. Please don't attach them as a file. And don't worry about trying to write like Charles Dickens. Just tell us your story as if you were telling a friend. And if you're not sure if it's actually a ghost story or not, but it's still weird, send it anyway. Also send us your photos, EVPs, recipes, your thoughts, and any artwork.
Check out our website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com for our ghost story archives, articles, photos, and expanded material. And you can buy t-shirts, mugs, laptop covers, and animals apparently with our logo on it. Follow us at Twitter at PFWhatAfraidOf. That's PFWhatAfraidOf.
You cannot escape the darkness, so explore it with us now at
What are you afraid of?
Death is not something we can control. A remarkable mixture of sexual eroticism and dark horror from the man with the Cthulhu shirt. J. Daniel Stone, remarkable. Okay, moving on to a remarkable talent and someone who I owe a great deal to, Sean Mocomer. He just did a review of my new book, Mercy, for Fangoria, which has been a great help, yeah. And the guy's remarkable. I mean, he talks about going overseas, and he's been published in multiple things like Rue Morgue and Fangoria. He's got a story in Grey Matters Press, Savage Beasts. I'd like to welcome Sean Mocomer.
Thank you. Expect less than what you got from the rest of these guys. This is a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I'm happy to have a couple of my heavy metal people here. Larissa Glasser, who's an amazing black metal musician as well as writer, and Sean Fraser, who is my colleague at Decibel and also an amazing writer, so I'm happy they came out. The way Savage Beasts worked is you chose some sort of musical inspiration. So I wanted to talk briefly about mine before I read a little bit of the story. My story was based on an album by the Dutch death metal band Pestilence called Consuming Impulse. And I came into possession of this record in a very strange way, which is I grew up in New Hampshire, and this was around 1991, I guess. I had been in, in August of that year, I had discovered Metal Maniacs, which is a sort of a classic magazine of extreme metal at the supermarket in New Hampshire, and all pre-internet, so you couldn't really go out and find these things. And in September, I went to my first big show, which was the Clash of the Titans tour, which was Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth. And so I had been just a huge Anthrax fan, and in fact, around this time, I remember looking at a poster of Anthrax on my wall and thinking to myself, God, I'll be so disappointed in myself if they're not always my favorite band. I told this story to Scott Ian of Anthrax, and true to his reputation, he was not impressed, and was like, great, let's get to it, as far as the interview goes. So anyway, at that show, I was not really familiar with Slayer. The Slayer backdrop at that time was pretty crazy. They had the backdrop would fall and it would show different scenes from different album covers, and I was really drawn to it just because it was so scary. But I knew there would be scarier stuff out there. So in 1990, about a year before, my grandmother had died, and she had left us some money, and my mom had left the post office where she worked to open a small store, and I would work there after school for no money. So anyway, while I'm walking to this store one day, these two guys stop me, and they're carrying a briefcase. They both have really long hair, and if you've ever seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, when they go back in time to learn how to play so they can have a band, and they come back and they get the long hair and the beards. That's what these guys look like. And so these guys stop me and they say, we're just passing through and we need some help. And I'm sorry, could I get a glass of water? Thank you. And which was strange because nobody passes through Rochester, New Hampshire to get to anywhere. There's nowhere on either side to go. So, thank you. So these guys randomly tell me, we just need a little cash to get out of town. we can sell you some CDs. So they open up the briefcase, and it's all these death metal CDs that I'd seen in this Metal Maniacs, but had not been able to get my hands on because I lived in New Hampshire. And so they sold me 3 CDs for $5. I had to go back and ask my mother for the money, and then come back and meet them. And so I didn't know what to ask for, so I just said, whatever you'll give me for these $5. So they gave me 3 records. The first one was Exhorder's Slaughter in the Vatican, which is got a picture on the front of the Pope being dragged off to the gallows. And on and on. But anyway, you get the point. This is pretty heady stuff for a 15-year-old who's listening to Anthrax, at the time. So the second record was Dismember's Like an Ever-Flowing Stream, which is, in my opinion, the greatest Swedish death metal record of all time. It's kind of a niche thing, but it's worth something. And then the third record was this Dutch death metal record by Pestilence, like I said, and that is just an insane record that covers a lot of ground, and it had a song called Out of the Body, which so anyway, this stuck in my head along with a memory I had of being at my grandmother's house and going to the railroad tracks out behind the house. There was one year where it was just crazy gypsy moths, and they built their webbing from tree to tree, the branches across over the thing. So you could go in there, and it was sort of like being in a big, strange tent. And those 2 things I brought together for this story, Pestilence by Bimar, which I will read just a couple pages of for you right now. Thank you. Pestilence by Bimar. Somewhere in the skies over New England, I watch Rhonda from Albuquerque tip and plunge towards the patchwork earth below, a fleshy ballistic missile in a flower print muumuu. Only a few moments ago I stood behind her, waiting on the first-class John to free up, wearing my best, not a terrorist, just trying to get a tinkle in before we begin our descent face. And then, whoosh, Lady Kismet plucks the pair of us up and out of a jagged rectangle of torn metal into the blinding blue. A fat camp alumnus in recently renewed good standing, I understand all too well the pain of a belly flop from 6 feet, never mind 30,000. But I am not yet so resigned as to follow Rhonda's kamikaze lead. So I flail myself into a spread eagle position, slacks torn clean off, flab waging an epic slap fight against the laws of aerodynamics, my briefs moonlighting as a windstock in the jet stream. Time slows. I recall my wife Simone standing in the plastic sheeting doorway of the backyard pesticide laboratory yesterday afternoon, arms crossed, grimacing at the rows of fellow ex-supermodels hunched over terrariums full of writhing grubs, mosquitoes, and hornets. I never thought I could pity a bug until I saw you go to work on one, Simone said. She never forgave me for abandoning my perfuming career. But after the Cape Town incident, what choice did I have? Rogue synthetic pheromones, swarms of locusts, siafu ants, mud wasps, witch doctor triage in a tribal village, paparazzi documenting mass disfigurement of internationally renowned lingerie models in real time on virtually every fashion blog in existence. The hubris launch had been high-grade tabloid catnip, an irredeemable fiasco. I'd since made amends the best I could, shifting professional gears to keep up with civil litigation and honoring the contracts of those Philyra's nymphs who stayed on to help me develop Pestilence by Bimar, a slightly modified signature version of hubris designed to awaken the latent insectivorous urge in certain unpopular arthropods. And while my lavender-scented uber pesticide does possess a certain green chic flair, what could be more organic than cannibalism, really, it isn't exactly the kind of invention that garners entree to the exclusive runway parties to which Simone had become accustomed as the face of my early campaigns. Alas, many of the girls didn't consider shaking the very foundations of the pest control industrial complex much of a consolation prize, and Simone especially felt obligated to remind me of my failure at every turn. Ciro trotted by, pushing a wheelbarrow full of mealworms. He gave me a cool nod as if I were a too-shy autograph seeker, not his boss, and Simone's platforms clacked away after him. Thank Christ, I mouthed at the earwig jittering through its death dance in the petri dish before me. Still, I felt a familiar twinge of guilt at my secret knowledge of the futility of her pursuit. Ciro had mistaken me for an injured model as we both lay on stretchers in that godforsaken Adobe South African clinic. In his defense, I had been swaddled in an English patient-esque mummy wrap, and bites and stings had transformed the actual talent around us into less attractive cousins of Joseph Merrick. Morphine made the usually aloof celebrity photographer chatty enough to not only relate the details of Simone's many and sundry garish advances, but also to confide that, newly disfigured or no, he was one former Greek Adonis who'd rather lay his locust-ransacked eye socket over a Formosan termite mound than bet a model dancing on the wrong end of the 18 to 34 demographic pole. Still, if unrequited love helps Simone maintain a little joie de vivre while I accumulated the capital necessary to raise an army of plastic surgeons, so be it. I tweezered up the next earwig and dabbed a drop of my pestilence just above its third thoracic ganglia, praying for signs of rabid derangement that might put a giant metaphorical exclamation point on my planned presentation the next day at the United States Forest Service outpost in New Hampshire. A small valley enshrouded in thick fog emerges from the fuzzy pastiche below. I enter the mist in thrall of the strange serenity provided by imminent death, but thin cotton candy-like tendrils quickly drag me back into panic, snagging at my limbs and torso, conglomerating, thickening, slowing my fall until I am sheathed in a man-sized Chinese finger trap, swaying gently upside down just above the forest floor. I retch, reel off a string of joyous obscenities, and retch again. Primal whoops of improbable triumph weave between dry heaves, so intense that my blood-engorged skull feels as if it is entering Cro-Magnon territory. At first I dismissed the peripheral scuttling as a mirage born of palpitating blood vessels and runoff bile, but when I palm scrubbed the blurring slick from my eyes, I begin to doubt whether I've actually survived the fall. An intricately personalized hell surrounds me. Throngs of gypsy moth caterpillars, scientific name Lamantria dispar, squirm out from the surrounding gossamer veil to feast upon a viscous melange of regurgitated Diet Coke, snack box number 2, and various gastric juices. I'm spackled into an egg mass so vast I cannot quite see its end in either direction. Hundreds of lesser sacs hang from its upper reaches, heavy with restless churning larvae. Moths sporting wingspans the size of beach kites fly in and out of a pie-shaped opening near the top, scattering snatches of leaves onto their progeny below. The caterpillars pyramid upwards, scaling strands of hair to weigh down my thrashing head, overwhelming my wheezing efforts to blow off the squiggly rising tide. I think of the PowerPoint presentation in which I'd wargamed for this very species, hurtling away somewhere on a laptop in an overbend a mile up. Amidst the profound sensory deprivation, my consciousness blossoms. Shifting patterns in the seething mass create a three-dimensional tableau upon which the saga of a gradual evolutionary journey slowly reveals itself. Through a deafening white noise rustle comes whispers of a millennia spent trekking across Eurasia in search of elusive sustenance, of capture in a long inexplicable voyage across the ocean in a meshed crate, raided often by malnourished deckhands, of the first pungent scent of the thick, forbidden foliage festooning an as-yet unspoiled new world, and yes, of Leopold Trouvelot, a French refugee from Napoleonic Terra exiled to Medford, Massachusetts, oblivious to his impending destiny as he struggled to squeeze his fortune from the ass-end loom of a North American giant silkworm. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para X.
I'm speaking to another one of the Dark Ones tonight, a fascinating man and talented author, Sean Marcumber. How are you today, Sean? Feeling pretty dark?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty dark. Pretty dark.
So tell us a little about the event that we will all be attending. I'm very excited that What You're Afraid of podcast will be hosting the event and that I'll be reading from some of my work from Grey Matter Press from Savage Beasts. It sounds like an incredible venue and a remarkable event.
Well, for anybody who hasn't been to the KGB Bar reading series, it's a real opportunity to hear some very interesting, out of the way fiction by authors who are doing cutting edge stuff. It's a real it creates a real interesting atmosphere. I think just the people they bring in and the ambiance and so it should be a good time. I always enjoy the readings there, so I'm excited to be a part of one. Also excited too that it is connected to the Gray Matter Press authors. These are all people that whose work I've read and appreciate, and John Foster's book Mr. White. I have an advanced copy of that, and it's wonderful. People should buy that, and it's a great piece of very interesting, very odd, very fun writing that I'm really happy to be part of an event that's centered around that particular work as well.
So tell us a little about yourself, what you're writing for, what you're doing these days. I know you've been traveling a lot recently.
Well, actually, I don't travel as much as I used to. I used to do overseas reporting, and I covered a couple presidential elections, and just generally, if I felt like something, was going on, I would go. Oh, Selena Gomez is trying to get out the vote in Glendale, California. Let me get on a plane, that sort of thing. And it was great, and it was a lot of fun, and I saw a lot of interesting things, and I met, a very diverse array of people, and blah blah blah. It was good for my development as a human being. But it's just really not for me anymore. I sort of regret chasing every lead in those days. It was sort of a solid decade of doing that, and at the time I was younger, and I felt like I had endless supply of life to live, and now my wife and I have been together 15 years, and my pug is 14 years old, and I'm realizing now more than I did then the value of life and sort of the limited resource that it is, and so I don't go on the road in the same way. If something that I really felt would advance my understanding of existence, or was a good opportunity that might move my career forward in a certain way, then I would do that kind of travel again, but not just as a matter of course like I did before. Essentially I love my wife, I love my kid, I love my dogs, I love my home life too much to make those sort of sacrifices anymore without a really good reason. As far as like what I do, I sort of like my Gray Matter Press bio starts off, that I'm a writer and noted pug wrangler in the New York City area, and that's sort of what I aspire to. If people have heard of me at all, especially people who listen to this podcast, they might have seen me in Fangoria, where I'm a regular in print and online for the last several years. I write a lot for Shock Till You Drop, which is now run by Chris Alexander, who was the editor-in-chief over at Fangoria for a long time, up until last year. I've done work for Rue Morgue, so that's kind of all in that zone. And then I write a lot about music. I write a lot about heavy metal, especially death metal and black metal for Decibel magazine, which is sort of America's #1 heavy metal magazine. I also write for Magnet, which is more indie rock, and then I've done stuff for a lot of the bigger rock music sites like Stereo Gum and other outlets like that. So in the past I've written a lot of political essays, right now, my niche is sort of writing about darker stuff, both in music and film, and it sort of dovetails nicely with the fiction work I try and do.
It was a thrill to be included in my second anthology with Grey Matter Press, Savage Beasts. What made this anthology different, and what was your story in it, and the source of its inspiration?
Yeah, my story, Pestilence by Bimar, inspired by the Dutch death metal band Pestilence and their album Consume Impulse from, I think, 1989, or it could have been 90 or 91, somewhere in that range, in the classic death metal era, is in Savage Beasts, the Grey Matter Press anthology that's dedicated to music. And, I'm really happy to be a part of that anthology because, not just because Anthony and Sharon, the two editors over at Grey Matter Press, the primary people, not just because they put out so much wonderful stuff in such a short amount of time, but also because while there's been a lot of there have been a lot of great horror music themed anthologies, I feel like this one has fewer boundaries, and I like the fact that a story inspired by Pestilence, a death metal band, can be in there alongside stories about classical music and Tom Petty and Nine Inch Nails and all these things. It's just a really diverse, interesting group of writers and a really diverse, interesting group of inspirations, and I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
The name of your story, its source, and the line that you want to read for us tonight.
It's Pestilence by Bimar, and it's, as I said, it's a story based on Pestilence, the Dutch death metal band's album Consume Impulse, which I think is maybe 1989. My lavender-scented uber pesticide does possess a certain green chic flair. What could be more organic than cannibalism, really?
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. And we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
And now, old friend of the show, John C. Foster.
Well, thank you, Dan, for doing all the heavy lifting earlier. So I'm just going to My section will be brief here, and Dan introduced what I think of as the first narrative track in the story, which is espionage in Europe, spies being pursued by this horrible supernatural entity, and the story progresses on from where Dan read to another operative named Lou. The second narrative track takes place back in the United States. Lou sends his estranged wife and daughter, high school-age daughter, into hiding. And so what I'd like to do is just introduce what I think of as sort of the beating heart of the novel that illustrates what's actually at stake here. You know, it's not just spies running around with their guns and their codes and all that stuff. They're actual real people that are finding themselves under threat because of bad things done overseas. So I'm going to introduce you to Catherine Edgar, a.k.a. Kat, his estranged wife. "You have a great ass," Jim slurred, and Kat had to bite back a scream before she made it into the bathroom and slapped at the light switch, missing it twice before the row of bulbs over the mirror blinded her and she flinched back. The feeling had swept over her like a tidal wave while pressing her face first into the mattress in a way that had once seemed violently sexy but was now smothering, the slap of his pelvis against her buttocks not raunchy but laughable. She was so incredibly sad. She braced her palms on the sink and looked at herself, not surprised to see the wet gleam of her eyes beneath a mass of dark hair. She looked haunted and feral, like something out of Dickens, if Dickens had written about cheating wives. God. The sordid tackiness of the affair had once been both shield and sword against her loneliness, an anger-fed solution to the increasing distance between Lou and herself, a counter to the growing conviction that he was leaving her, had already left her, was in love with another woman. She hadn't seen Jim since before Lou's last trip home, had told Jim that it was over, a fling. Let's be grown-ups and enjoy it for what it was, she had said back then, a model of suburban sophistication. I knew you'd call again, Jim had told her when she dialed his number from memory after Lou's last call. Distracted Lou, not listening Lou. She ran the water and wetted a tissue to wipe herself clean, forcing herself to watch the inelegant task in the mirror. Her nipples were hurting and she looked in his medicine cabinet for some sort of skin cream, but couldn't find anything besides a bottle of men's hair color and Tylenol. She felt like a kid who had been playing in the dark, only to have the light switched on and discover she was in a dumpster. Everything about the aftermath of their sex was awful. The reek of his cologne, the red skin of her inner thighs where his rough beard hurt her, the stale beer and cigarette taste of his tongue. Kat doubled over and retched up a thin stream of tequila-flavored bile into the sink, cupping her hand to lift water to her mouth. "Quite a life you've carved out for yourself, Kat," she said to her naked reflection, and did the best she could to record every detail about the single unhappiest moment in her life. Green fingers of mold crawled up the corners of his coffin-like shower stall, and Kat decided. Sorry. And Kat decided she could wait until she got home to wash away his stink, even if she had to drive with the window down. The strains of long, cool woman in a black dress blended with the hiss of air through her open window as she piloted the Jeep Cherokee towards home. She'd stabbed the radio buttons at random, unable to handle the silence or her usual NPR talk radio. She needed something to keep her tethered, afraid of the incredible numbness spreading throughout her mind. The idea that her marriage had likely drifted beyond the point of no return was too enormous, too terrifying to face head-on. There was no single catastrophic event that came to mind as having set the course towards where she found herself. It was, instead, a series of small decisions and minor cowardices, death by 1,000 cuts. The loneliness when Lou started working overseas again. Hetty entering high school, throwing up walls where there had once been open roads between mother and daughter. The decision to work as a consultant from home instead of having the companionship of an office. Isolation had bred not a desire for contact, but a need to turn even further inward. She looked up and realized she had no idea how long she had been parked in the strip mall, no recollection of pulling over. It was no coincidence that she had parked in front of a liquor store. Day drinking was a new event in her life, but every small burning sip screamed a warning at her that she had chosen to ignore. I don't want it to be over. The voice wasn't hers, couldn't be hers. It reminded her of Hetty when she was younger, when she still let them hold her hand, when she still talked to them. Them, Kat and Lou. God, she remembered how cool she thought they sounded the first time she'd heard someone else describe them as a couple. The thing is, they had been cool. They had been fun. It wasn't fake. It was real. It had been real. I don't like this. That same small voice. A sudden barking sob burst from her, and she wiped at her eyes with the heels of her hands, smearing dark eyeliner, not caring. She threw the Jeep into reverse and nearly backed into a compact car entering the lot, ignoring the irate honk of the horn as she peeled out of the parking lot. Her phone beeped to let her know there was an incoming message, but she didn't feel solid enough behind the wheel to check it, and had zero interest in being hounded about copy deadlines. What was it her friend had said? There was a cannot give. She pulled into a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru for a necessary cup of coffee, and had forgotten about the unread email by the time she pulled into the A&P to pick up groceries for dinner. Let me just check time really fast. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you.
We're speaking with John Foster, the sponsor of it all, as it were, author of Mr. White with Grey Matter Press. How are you this evening, John?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back, Fox.
Absolutely. We had a great episode 5 with you over Christmas, remember? We had a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
How did you start writing?
Yeah, that's a funny one because I had a lot of teachers telling me that I should be a writer when I was younger, when I was a terrible student, and I thought that was a terrible idea. But I read voraciously, and I was constantly writing Dungeons and Dragons adventures. And somehow, when I got to college, I was hanging with the theater crowd, and I thought I wanted to be an actor. Then I realized I had no talent, and I thought maybe I could be a writer. And then some people had told me about Los Angeles and the film industry, and I had never been there or seen a screenplay, but I drove out when I was 20 to become a screenwriter, and that's how I got started.
You live in New York City with Linda.
Yes.
Who's a voice actress.
Yes.
Who was good enough to do a story for us a little while back. We'd love to have her back sometime.
I think she'd love to do it. She had fun.
And you wrote a novel for Grey Matter Press called Mr. White.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind Mr. White?
It was a mix of my love for spy thrillers and my love for horror fiction. And when I was really hitting my stride as a reader, as a teenager, I essentially traded back and forth between Robert Ludlum and Stephen King. And they were equally important to me. And while horror has transcended other genres in large part for me, I've never lost my yen for a good spy thriller. I just love them. And I had an idea to try to put them together, and I thought about the idea of who watches the watchers. And in the case of covert operatives, these are people quite literally trained to be criminals in other countries. How do you track them if they go bad? What if it's a supernatural menace? And then I sort of went from there.
So you're going out to StokerCon?
I am. I was dealing with the tax issues for selling books and buying booze for the party we're hosting today.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your future? What do you have next coming up?
I have a lot of irons in the fire right now. Let's see. The next book that will come from me will be from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, who published.
Yes.
They published my first novel, Dead Men, and Night Roads is the continuation of that story. It's a trilogy called The Libros de Inferno, and that book is in the sort of polishing process right now. It's a little long. It's longer than Mr. White, and there are. If you remember, there are a trillion characters, so I'm fortunate to have excellent readers helping me out. And then I secured an agent at the beginning of the year here in New York, which is a big step forward for me. And she has my book, The Isle, and I'm hoping that I will be able to share good news over the summer about that. And then I also have a collection. My first collection of short stories is going to be coming out. And right now, that and Night Roads are sort of jockeying for position. That's also with Perpetual Motion. And so we'll see which one comes out first. It'll either be the end of this year or the beginning of 2017.
Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, who was also our sponsor and provides us with some great flash fiction. Hopefully we'll get another piece from Max soon.
Yeah, Max and Lori are great to work with as well. I've been really, really fortunate in the people that have embraced my long-form fiction. And Well, you never say never about working with other people. Boy, if I never worked with anyone else, I mean, that would be fine, because these guys, they're both great.
So, you're going to be reading us a line.
Yes.
From Mr. White.
Yes, it's the first line in the story, and it is a pivotal line for the book. Ready for the line?
Absolutely.
Who is Mr. White? That's the line.
Wonderful. I was waiting there. I know. I'm actually looking at the book on my shelf right now. I've been doing so much research in crime in Philadelphia, I haven't had a chance, but every night I keep going, tonight's the night I'm going to pick it up and read it. So soon. And I'm going to do a review, and we'll read it on the podcast.
That would be awesome. I would love to hear that.
It's coming up. And hopefully we will see you at the end of June in Philadelphia for some events I'm setting up.
I think that sounds wonderful. I'm excited about that because, of course, it's also my birthday, so that's a great way to celebrate.
You and James Chambers, it turns out.
June was a good month.
Yeah. We have been speaking this evening with John Foster, author of Mr. White, an upcoming horror author. Thank you for being with us, John.
Thanks a lot, Fox. Take care.
The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They crawl all over your dirty snout, your chest. My name is David Walton. I am a vocal performer for What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal show. And I have carried the burden of a terrible secret. I am actually what is offensively called a ghost. For years now I have concealed my ectoplasmic existence from my friends and family in fear of a common prejudice against ghosts, or what we like to call the disembodied. I have existed frightened of being discovered, unable to do physical acts that the embodied take for granted, such as walking a squirrel, or drinking a glass of vitamin E milk fresh squeezed from a whale. I grew depressed and even considered acts of self-harm or reincarnation, which is suicide for the disembodied. Such movies as Ghostbusters and its sequels drove my feelings of disenfranchisement, and I began looking for help, only to encounter painful exorcisms in the houses I haunted. Then I met two good people, it says here, Fox and Phil, at What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal. And they helped me take control of my own life. Now, it is my choice whether I wish to make phantom bangs in the night, appear at the foot of your bed in darkness, or make your walls bleed. If you are a disembodied person like I am, and you're living a lie, What Are You Afraid Of? Can help you too. They are on at 9 p.m. on Friday nights at Para-X Radio, leaving plenty of time for midnight haunting activities, and can be found on all major podcast services. Listen to their paranormal stories, interviews, humorous sketches and horror fiction to know that you are not alone. And if you are a member of the embodied, don't forget, you are only a single heart attack or tumour away from becoming one of us. This is David Walton. See you on the other side, or as I call it, this side. And that is the end of a perfect day.
Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
My name is Greg Bakken. I'm a writer, a producer, and a paranormal investigator. My favorite way of communicating with spirits is through using the spirit box, also known as a ghost box. I invite you to listen to me every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Central for interviews with people in the paranormal community and beyond. Plus, I will also include as much of my spirit box evidence as I can during my show. My name is Greg. Can you say Greg? Can you say Jeff? Greg. Jeff. Join me every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Central Time for for Minnesota Ghost Box, only on Para X Radio.
Daniel Brahm, J. Daniel Stone, Sean Morecumber, John Foster, some hack named T. Fox Dunham. Books are on the table. Come over and get one. Amazing stuff from Grey Matter Press. I want to thank the KGB Bar and Club for having us here tonight and supporting authors like ourselves. And I'm T. Fox Dunham, co-host of What Are You Afraid of podcast. We need your true ghost stories, and this will be appearing as an episode on the podcast. Check us out. I have some cards up there, and I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Make sure to get another drink before you go home. Support the club. It's a great place. And for those of you traveling this weekend, be careful. Some heavy snow's coming in. So, in my native language, I want to say, Monarch, and thank you all for joining us. The Dark Five will reign.
Your source for everything paranormal, Para X.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Book. A major motion picture based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was recently released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology, Points of Origin, from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Mercy was recently released by Bloodbound Books. Fox is an active member of the Harvard Association. He's been published in hundreds of short stories and articles, and his motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time.
Phil Thomas resides in the suburbs of Philadelphia and is an author and filmmaker. His screenplays have been produced into feature films such as False Face and Always from Darkness that are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon On Demand.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.